Climate change, it's there are two different answers. First of all, climate does change. Climate has never stayed constant, even from the days of dinosaurs. It changed. They had ice ages, and then they had floods, and then they had all these kind of things. And so climate always changes. So climate change is real. It is changing. Um, the impact of human activity on atmospheric conditions, climate basically atmospheric conditions and cycles, that is real because of the emissions, pollutants in the air and all that kind of thing. However, the crisis, the narrative, the high-pitched sort of screaming we hear right now, that smells bad. That's what smells like a scam to you. And that indeed is a scam. Because if the people who make most noise about it, and it's the West, are the worst polluters. If they really believed, if they really believed their own narrative, they'd stop burning coal. They'd stop consuming at the crazy rate they're consuming at. There are estimates that if the whole world consumed resources at the rate at which the United States consumes them, we'd need 5 Earths. That's the rate at which they. So us in Kenya, the typical African country, consumes at a rate where you'd need 1 Earth, which is what we have. India does even better because the rate per capita consumption of resources in India is less than, you'd need less than 1 Earth if everyone consumed as little as every individual in India does per capita. So that's the reality. If this thing is the crisis they say it is, they would be doing something about it. And by doing something, I mean they'd be cutting down their emissions, they'd be cutting down their burning of coal, nuclear power stations, the number of vehicles they have on the road, their consumption in terms of energy for air conditioning, for all these kind of things. They'd look at ways of cutting that down, not ways of reducing consumption in Africa. They'd cut down the wars. I mean, there's no environmentally friendly war. If you think of, they're telling us about the impact of our livestock on environment. What's the impact of their bombs on environment? And that's the truth, because war is the military-industrial complex. War is an industry. So they can't tell us and shouldn't tell us anything about environment until they stop war. Yeah, this is the scam. That's the anatomy of the scam. Because if we go back to the 18th century, European empires and colonized so many countries and continents around the world through the power of military means, sort of weaponry, etc., and oppression and slavery and all that kind of thing. Fast forward to now, the world has changed. You can't come and conquer Africa. We know your narrative, we know your story, we've seen it before, we've heard it before. So you need a new scam. Enter climate, the climate crisis. Suddenly, the climate crisis and environmental conservation is the one thing that makes Black Africans listen to what Prince William has to say. It's the one thing that makes a small country in Europe purport to order a continent what to do. It's the perfect foil. So right now, what we have is that instead of reducing their emissions, they're using it to suppress us, because the West's nightmare today is the growth of Africa. In terms of creativity, Africa is a hotbed of creativity, is the repository of the world's greatest reserves of all natural resources you can think about. African populations are young, full of energy, physical and mental energy. And for some reason, African people are resilient. You remember all the questions being asked about how come not so we aren't having a million deaths from COVID in Africa. Health science has always sought to study why people are dying, not why people are living, until the COVID thing came. So this is the West's nightmare. And the only way they can put a lid on this is through the climate crisis. That's why it's fine that they have created electric cars and all these kind of things, but don't foist them upon us. We will buy and use them as and when we like. Thank you very much. It's I need to continue doing what I'm doing, so I need you to stop progressing so that you leave pollution space for me. And that's the basis of what I often call climate colonialism. And it's to hold other countries back, particularly in the global south, so that the West can continue progressing, can continue polluting, can continue with their wars. Yeah. We would grind to a halt. And leave alone the amount of technology, the amount of money we would have to pay the West for that technology would make our development untenable. It would just grind to a halt. And even just a small snapshot is I live in a fairly rural place, and we depend on these motorcyclists, the border guys, for all sorts of things, transport and delivering things. And suddenly, after the climate summit, these electric motorcycles were foisted upon motorcyclists all over the country, on loan, of course, very expensive loans which you pay. So they got these bikes, and the first thing they realized is that these bikes cannot carry 2 sacks of potatoes, which is typical of what motorcycles are used for in the rural area. You carry some guy and his sack of potatoes, or 3 sacks of potatoes, or 3 huge pails of milk. And the electric motorcycles couldn't do that. So the few who had taken them quickly abandoned them and went back to their internal combustion engine ones. The objective is not to make us environmentally sustainable, because we've always been. The objective is to put us in financial paralysis. What we do here should be for us. Carbon credits, first of all, to be clear, this is the biggest scam ever visited on mankind in history. You cannot think of any other that's anywhere near as big as this. The idea that Mordecai planting trees in Kenya mitigates a factory polluting a river in New York or Germany somewhere, it's ludicrous in the extreme. But we've sort of gotten into a perfect storm, because we are in the information age. So information, people get information, but it's you have to filter it out. The BS flies as fast as the good information. So we've gotten into an age of quantitative thinking. Suddenly, if John Kerry is saying it, and Prince William is saying it, and so is saying it, then we think it's credible. It's just as sort of rubbish as if the village drunkard is saying it. It doesn't matter if someone in the White House is saying it, or in Buckingham Palace. So the thing is, the movement of money. Money laundering is defined as illegal movement of money without goods or services being purchased. And that is for everyone in the West who buys an air ticket and you're told, do you want to pay an extra $10 for carbon offset? What are you paying for? Stop paying that money. But the worst thing about the millions, hundreds of millions of dollars that are moving around, is that these monies are used to annex lands in Africa. And if we think back to colonialism, 18th century, colonialism was not a political project. It was a capitalist project. Before the British government came to East Africa, the first people to come was Imperial British East Africa Company. Same thing in India, the East Asia Company and all that. It was the commercial sort of carpetbaggers, looters came first. And then the political angle just followed later on when they needed to hold on to this looting a bit longer. And this is what's happening with the conservation organizations. They are the Imperial British East Africa Company, the Nature Conservancy, WWF. These are the Imperial British East Africa Company. And they take the capitalists' money, come and use it to annex lands, and eventually political power follows. The concept of conservation, we need to philosophically examine it. Because first of all, if you go around any indigenous African language, we don't have a word for conservation. Because that was just the way we lived. You don't mess up the river because you need to drink that water. You don't mess up the forest because you need to collect medicinal plants or firewood or beekeeping, those things people do in the forest, or it's sacred. Some forests even are sacred sites. So you don't destroy it. So you keep your compound clean because it's for you and your family. So conservation is a concept that it grows out of destructive societies who don't own anything. Who don't own anything, don't revere anything, but exploit everything. So they need a word to sort of say, oh, wait a minute, we are finishing it. And it grew out of the settler colony, that's the United States. And if we read history, this is why it's important for people in the conservation sector to be grounded in the humanities. If we read history, we know there were 60 million bison roaming North America. They were hunted down to under 100 animals. And this was not by a huge population of people. What was the population of settlers in the United States in the 1800s? It may have been a few tens of thousands of people. This is an extraordinary commitment to killing. The bison survived through this narrow genetic bottleneck, but the most powerful story is lesser known. It's of the passenger pigeon. The passenger pigeon, the population in the Americas was over 5 billion birds, billion. Legend says when the flocks would fly by, the sun would be dark like an eclipse. And they hunted them to extinction. The last one died in 1914. Now, if you think of a pigeon, and back then they had just these simple repeater rifles, shoot, reload, shoot, reload. Can you imagine the commitment to killing it takes to finish, to extirpate 5 billion birds, small birds? It's also skill. It's not like a bison, which is a huge animal. This is skilled shooting, to shoot a pigeon. But that shows you their commitment to killing. So my submission is that lessons on environmental sustainability can come from anywhere except the United States. We have nothing to learn from the United States on biodiversity conservation. Nothing. They have everything to learn from us. So the concept of a protected area, national park, whatever, is a form of violence. It was first meted out on the Native Americans in Yosemite, Yellowstone, in the late 19th century. Roosevelt came to Africa, or to Kenya, for his famous safari in 1910-11. And this concept came here. And now, as independence came, national parks, if you look at the creation of national parks across Africa, was accelerated when towards the mid 20th century, when independence was approaching. And these were created to remain as white spaces in a rapidly blackening continent. And that's just what they were. And they're not natural. It's not natural to keep people away from Mount Kenya, for example. Mount Kenya is a source of so many rivers, medicinal plants, wood fuel, dry season grazing for people. It's a sacred site for the Kikuyu people and the Meru people, I think, as well. So it's not natural to fence Mount Kenya, but we are doing it because we've decided to do it the white way. So this is not this is not natural. The concept of protected areas is a form of violence, and fences themselves are forms of violence. If you talk of fences, talk of Gaza, talk of North-South Korea, talk of the Berlin Wall, which used to be there. Well, ironically, they're knocking down fences in Europe. They eliminated those barriers as they put up these ones here. And we must, the concept of people living with the environment, using the environment, and sharing the environment is the highest form of civilization. The highest form of civilization. When you fence something to keep humans away, that is the lowest form of civilization. But if talking about Kenya, as I was saying earlier, is basically the imperialist's dream. The British managed over the years that they ruled this country, they convinced us that they are the best. We still believe that to this day. And we believe in the pursuit of whiteness. And I'm talking about Kenya, and I mean our conservation sector, our commercial sector, our government, our state. White is right. And this is a serious handicap to our growth, as you say. And we really should have those thematic sort of officers. You know, the way every ministry, whether it's Ministry of Education, whether every ministry has an accountant to make sure the money is used properly or whatever. Yes, you're right. We should have every ministry sort of with a thematic person. Why are you doing this? How does this serve us? Because science acknowledges Kenya as the cradle of mankind. The oldest human remains were found in northern Kenya. Yet the same scientists come and tell us that our population is a problem to elephants. In 2024, after X million years, now we are a problem. And we believe that. If you look at the policies across Africa, you come to a country like Kenya, you cannot find a Kenyan basis for any Kenyan policy, be it educational policy, financial policy, conservation policy, or even foreign policy. That's why we have a bunch of our policemen in Haiti, because we don't know. We can't. No one can explain to you how or why that serves our interests. But it's just because Uncle Sam said it. Yay, let's go and do it. And these things are all connected, because our interview started from the point of conservation. But you see, conservation, our use of natural resources, our rights, the humanities, our philosophy, it's all connected. It's all connected. And that's why things like, you see active opposition to pastoralism, livestock production, which is, if you look at the map of Africa, start from West Africa, that's across the Sahel, Horn of Africa, down into Kenya. That is, I'm talking about a chunk of 40% of Africa is run by livestock production, light footprint, shared resources, sustainable, socially, politically, environmentally, everything. And the West is fighting tooth and nail against pastoralism. I'm sure you've seen articles that claim our cows are producing methane emissions. Our Ministry of Livestock in Kenya right now actually has an office about livestock sustainability, which is an office used to suppress livestock production. And I had a gentleman from there speak at the Global Landscape Forum held in Nairobi sometime last year. And I was appalled. We are actively suppressing the livelihood of 40% of Africa. We are actively suppressing it because the West wants to suppress it. You know, until last year, we talk a lot with some colleagues that we know what this problem, but we couldn't see what could possibly extricate us from this prison we were in, this mental prison we were in. And then stuff started happening in West Africa. And I said, oh my God, something's happening here. And then it spread to various West African countries. And then look what's happening in Kenya now. And it's a season. It's come. It's the way, it's like, if excuse the pun, it's like climate change. What are you going to do? And I feel sorry for all those who think that this thing can be suppressed somehow. And if you look now, Africa, from the sort of wave of independence, we are approaching that magical 70-year mark. I don't know if it might be something tied to the human lifespan. Like there's a generation that the generation that swallowed the BS dies, either actually or intellectually. In Kenya, we have so many of these scholars, professors who are intellectually dead because they still tell you how we should do things following the Western imperial way. But those ideas die. It's that 70-year mark, and it has come. So, like for Kenya and other parts of Africa as well, this is what has come, and you're gonna have to change. Because it's this wave that's coming. So what are you gonna do? You have to get in a boat and float, or else it's gonna sweep you away. We have two choices: support it or get out of the way, because this season has come across Africa, and it's not going back. A short while ago, you see, its time comes. People like Lumumba tried it then, but it was impossible. He got killed for it. Sankara got killed for it. So many other African leaders got killed for it because they wanted to bring what's going on now, but it's time. The season hadn't come. So they got killed for it, and their countrymen stood by and watched them get killed. Racism is a very present and dangerous force amongst us, as is colonialism. But those who are blind to this it's an intellectual limitation, I call it, because in Kenya, racism is no longer, it's philosophical, it's whiteness. You might be someone as black as I am. In Kenya, we have so many white blacks. So many. They're more than the whites. And they are now some of the biggest beneficiaries of racism. I mean, if you support, for example, in my field, the conservation field, if I chose to support the Nature Conservancy in their racist annexation policies where they want to grab African resources, I'd be paid a handsome salary for that. That's the fact of the matter. The brutal, cruel colonial officers. It was very clear when the DC used to be a white man and he could mete out all sorts of cruelty on the locals. But then, right now, the biggest beneficiaries of that structure that was set up is black administrators, black leaders, black cabinet ministers, black members of the executive, at all sorts of levels. And this is This is the inequality thing. So it's imperialism. It's imperialism, and imperialism is a structure, as Patrick Wolf says, settler colonialism is not an event, it's a structure. And imperialism, there's the emperor at the top, but there are the courtiers, there the watchman at the gate of the palace, and all these are beneficiaries of imperialism. And the emperor has so much, but these guys down here don't have much. They will even fight harder than the emperor to defend the empire, because that position at the gate is all he has as a gatekeeper. And with no emperor, he's nothing. And and it goes into all systems. Like if you look at agricultural production, we have all these flower farmers and all that, but they have to export their flowers through a cartel of Europeans. We have to export our tea through a cartel of Europeans, as our coffee and that kind of thing. Our education system, you've heard even our president say, it's equipping our kids to go and work for Europeans. And they say it openly. And they've gotten to a point that they believe their own hype. They don't even listen to themselves anymore. And that's the racism. It's they're the top beneficiaries of racism, which are the white people in Western countries and even here and all that. But the biggest obstacle to overcoming racism is the gatekeepers and cooks in the palace, and the courtiers and the court jesters. The fact that our leaders are court jesters in someone's palace is the biggest obstacle to us. And this is what suddenly we have a bunch of people rebelling against. And the court jesters can't understand what's happening, because they actually forgot that they're court jesters. They actually thought they are now leaders in their own right. But no, they're not. That's why the policies we've had in place so far, they don't work for us. They were not created for us. They are not ours. We need to just turn a new page. And we have the knowledge, we have experts in every field, but what we lack is courage. How many farmers are producing a crop that he has no use for? He has to sell to someone. I mean, the World Bank came with a project where I live, and this is a couple of years ago, where they were recruiting farmers to stop growing maize, the normal maize, and start growing the popcorn type of maize. And I asked my neighbor, why on earth would you grow that? You can't grind it and make ugali with it. You can't sell it to me to feed my chickens or whatever. Why on earth? And you're doing the exact same work, except it's creating a dependency. That's why we must understand that what is here belongs to us. And anybody who comes from, there is no way anybody gets on a plane, comes from 10,000 miles away to come here to serve our interests. No way. It doesn't happen. And I've been in the indigenous people's rights field for some time now. And it was in a seminar in New York, and I spoke a lot about the violation of rights, indigenous people's rights, by USAID funded conservation projects in Kenya. And a very wise Native American scholar called Tom Goldtooth, he came and asked me, like, they don't care about us. When do you think they're going to get to caring about you? He said, I'm from Dakota and somewhere here, and we are still talking about these things from 200-300 years ago. And he said, like, and I said, people need to stand up. And his point was like, yeah, no one's going to back off from evil when you appeal to his morality. Please stop doing this. Then no, and we no longer need to fight them. We just shut them out. Just shut the door. And I think it was the Africa Climate Summit, or there was an environmental meeting, and Isaias Afewerki spoke, and he said, "You guys are wasting our time. What are these things you're talking about? All these things you're wasting." And everybody was sort of there were other heads of state there, and they were all sort of cringing. But what he was saying was true. We cannot be the garden that they keep green as they trash the environment with their capitalist aims. And the reason why you can tell this is colonialist is because no conservation organization has ever come from China wanting to sequester carbon in Kenya or India. These are big polluters, but they're trying to sort out whatever it is they're trying to sort out their pollution in situ, there where it's happening. That's why you can tell it is an imperial colonial thing. The fact that I can pollute here, then I want to fly to Kenya to plant trees or take land from Mordecai for tree planting because of my pollution in Europe or in the Americas. That is the definition of colonialism. So if Africa can find this spiritual position that transcends our language, Francophone, this Portuguese, whatever, transcend language barriers, transcend these fake lines drawn across the continent and that kind of thing, that spiritual position, it will be unassailable. What was brought to us as education, going to school and all that, for some reason, we felt, or we were convinced that it could not coexist with what we knew intrinsically. That we have to reject something to embrace this education. And using myself as an example, everything I say and how I think is in spite of my education. It's not because of it. It's in spite of my education. Every stage of my education, from primary school to my PhD, has been against what I'm saying now. The most important part of this this quote is the fact that those needs and aspirations, by definition, are what's sustainable socially. If we do anything for external needs change. External policies change. If we did something to please the United States, governments change. They have elections, they have their own priorities, upheavals, etc. So we might do whatever they wanted perfectly. Certainly the new guy doesn't want it. And we'll be always on this treadmill. We won't make any progress. If we train, let's say our youth to produce food, whether it's agriculture, food that we need. We train our youth to manage our rangelands, to produce livestock while maintaining herds of wildlife, the beautiful herds of wildlife. We'll come up with something beautiful that we will enjoy and tourists will find fascinating when they come. If we think we can fence a place and keep it free of black people for tourists, because that's what we think is the value of tourism now. We try and create places in Kenya free from black people so that we create that out of Africa type of experience. That won't work. We're talking about climate change or the global environment. Fencing a forest, if global warming will happen, fencing a forest will not create a cool area in a heated world. That the warming, it will be warm even inside that fence, and this kind of thing. So those external needs are created out of fictitious models that are created by scientists to serve the interests of the capitalists who fund them. And I'm saying this as a scientist. A lot of science is prostitution. you need to get the next grant to write the next paper, and it's a treadmill, not solve any problem, because solving a problem makes you irrelevant. It's not profitable to solve problems. And scientists, like everybody else, are after money. So that mantra of believe the science, no, question the science. Question the science. Ask the scientist, is this your own work or someone who gave you a grant? Oh, okay, now I can see. Yes, you got a grant from Gates Foundation. Safari Club International, which is a hunting organization, funds wildlife ecologists in Africa. And you see their numbers of lions population are going up. Some are giving figures of lions that are so high, you wonder how children are going to school amongst these lions, or are they living in our houses? But that's what we need to do. We need to study. Those of us who are experts, we study ecology, sociology, political science, anthropology, all this to serve our needs. Agriculture, let it produce what we want, what we need. And then we can go ahead from there. But if it comes from outside, if whatever priorities comes from outside, it won't take us anywhere. We are just becoming colonies. Our preferences for our food preferences. It's not discussed now. What's contained in our food? We eat a lot of stuff that's really chemically really bad for us, and we need to think about why those things get pushed. Because it's connected to other things. And I'll just give an example. Suddenly, all the soft drinks companies are giving us sugar-free options. It's not because they care about our health. It's because they want to avoid empowering sugarcane farmers. They don't want to pay sugarcane farmers. Sugarcane is a tropical crop. So we're talking global south. So suddenly, artificial sweeteners to help the sugarcane farmers, and then suddenly you come to Kenya, yay, we are caring about your health. Here's the sugar-free thing, and those kind of things. And think of lab-grown meats, all these strange white liquids that are sold called milk. It's about disempowering livestock farmers. We are introducing all sorts of foods, GMO foods, and an example from my home, I like chilies, so I went and bought some seeds and planted chilies, and this chili crop grew and they ripened, turned red, and even the birds wouldn't touch them. So I went home to my ancestral home. I found my grandmother's old chili bush, which was the tiny little ones, and planted that, and the birds are all over them. And when they ripen, you can smell them and everything. And it's the same thing with maize. The sort of those with colored grain and all the birds are all over them. Plant the plain white maize, and even the birds don't eat. So even the animals know there's a problem here. There's a problem here. So I think the food, we really need to look at what we eat, what we purchase. My favorite quote is from the late Patrick Wolf. He said, "Settler colonialism is not an event, it's a structure." We are fighting very hard to remove the oppressors and colonialists, but we didn't fight so hard to replace them. Instead of removing them, we have contrived to replace them. So we weren't fighting for freedom, we were fighting for the right to oppress. So and freedom is not a person. It's not a person. It's what comes after captivity is removed. But we wanted just to remove the captors, not the captivity. So I think we needed. It's really important to understand that structures. If we can't dismantle structures, replacing the people in those structures doesn't do anything. Yeah.